presented by SFU Public Square. We want to thank our sponsors, SFU Vancouver, the Center for Dialogue, the SFU City Program, the director of the city over there, Price. We want to acknowledge that this event is taking place on unceded traditional Coast Salish territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Salamo nations. And anybody here for the first time? Ah, good. Okay. Crap that everybody else in the room has heard over and over. This is a very formal-looking lecture. Right? We don't have a medical doctor and doing a cadaver section. These guys are going to surprise us today. But it is formal, and we want to make this as informal and relaxed a conversation. Please, we want this to be as relaxed and informal as possible. We don't have speakers, and we don't have an audience. Right? What we have are presenters, and we have participants, and you are participants. So you're really right? Our presenters briefly frame the conversation. We're going to take a combined total of 15 minutes out of our hour to just tell you about themselves, tell you about what they do, tell you about their communities. But most of the time is for your questions, your opinions, your observations. It's not just from you to them and them to you. If you hear something that somebody over here says, and you have a different view, or you want to comment on that or draw something out, please do. I'll just be here helping to coordinate, trying to see if we can develop things so that the questions just don't bounce all over the place. If you brought your lunch, thank you so much. It is not rude to eat your lunch at city. Okay? If you are tweeting, there we go. It's hashtag CityCon, CITYCONV, and we encourage you to do that. Today our topic is rising stars, new politicians in the region. They host public planning sessions at their parties. They offer residents who complain of speedy cars a choice. We can slow the traffic, we don't have less street parking, and go get a bike. They supply all of Vancouver's water and much of its outdoor recreation. They're young, they're imaginative, they're elected. They're not Vancouverites. We are not the center of the universe. What? I know, what a shock. But we are not even the center, at least the geographical center of the region. And these are regional representatives of the communities around us. And we want to find out today, what are they doing that we can learn from? What are we supplying to them? What are they supplying to us? They spend a lot of time doing their craft, and they have a great time doing so. And this conversation emerged out of a meeting that four of us had over here. And I realized that the way they interact is more important than the way they individually present. So this is really going to be interactive today. So it's a conversation with Matthew Bond, who's from the counselor from North Vancouver, Nathan Patel, who is the new counselor from Langley City, and Patrick Johnson, who's the counselor from New Westminster. With that, it's over to you guys. Who's first?
I'm first. So just a small clarification of the district of North Vancouver. There is a city in North Vancouver, but it's just just a small thing if you weren't aware of that.
It's an important difference, but, and my apologies.
No worries. And as Michael mentioned, we're here to hopefully provide some regional perspective. So maybe if I could just get a show of hands, how many people here live in the city of Vancouver? Okay, great. Pretty much everyone, which is great. I've heard kind of anecdotally that people in the city don't even leave the city. I have about maybe 10 friends that have lived in the city for about 5 years, and most of them have never even been to Surrey or Langley. So I'd like to do a little bit of a test here. So if you've been to North Vancouver, not the sea bus just on the other side, but outside into the forest or outside of North Vancouver in the past year, could you please stand up? Oh, okay. That's good. So there's a few people that haven't. Well, how about if you still stay standing? If you've been there in the past month, stay standing. Okay. How about the past week? Okay. How many people here live in North Vancouver? Well, that's great. So for those of you that haven't been to North Vancouver or aren't there that frequently, you probably think of North Vancouver as this. Oh, it's on the other side of the bridge. There's an ocean in the way, and lots of green stuff up there. And, or maybe you're skiing in the winter and you're looking down and you're like, oh, what's North Vancouver? Well, it's that those few lights there before I see my beautiful hometown of the city of Vancouver. So what does North Vancouver actually look like? Well, this is a view from the over the Ironworkers Bridge, looking east, and that's pretty green. There's lots of trees. There's about 25,000 people that live on the east side of the Seymour River, which kind of winds through the middle there. We're right over top of Highway 1, the superstore there, if you're looking that way. If you look kind of north and west, you can see Highway 1 snaking through the middle, Lynn Valley, and the Seymour watershed are up to the right. Over on the top in the middle, you see Capilano watershed, and in the distance, West Vancouver. Lots of port activity in North Vancouver. And you can kind of see the city. We've kind of got them hemmed in by the highway and surrounded them on all sides. So regional politics there for you. So who are we? Well, in the district of North Vancouver, we're pretty wealthy, actually. If you look at our income spread, almost a quarter of our population, these are households, earn more than $150,000 a year. And comparing that, since I have the luxury of being first, I'm going to compare my community to everyone else's community. Median household income and average household income are almost twice what they are in Langley and West, and slightly more than Vancouver. So we're looking at 85,000 still 2010, 2011 surveys from StatsCan. And I'm an engineer, so I had to include some graphs in my presentation. When you look at dwelling types, so we'll talk about housing. Vast majority single detached homes in North Vancouver compared to looking at West Langley and Vancouver, where there's a lot more higher percentage of apartments. When you look at population, look at demographics, you can see quite profound kind of boom bust echo, if you guys are familiar with David Foote. Not a lot of young people between ages 30 and 40 in North Vancouver, whereas there's a lot more different spread in a lot of the other municipalities here. Population growth. So I graphed this over the BC stats data that we have. You can see there's a lot of blue, which is North Vancouver, actually on the downside. So when we think about a growing region, what impact does that have? So I put this in a bit of a chart here. So from 2001 to 2015, population in North Vancouver actually went down, declined. Whereas if you look at Langley, New West, and the city of Vancouver, percentage-wise, New West grew the most, and the city of Vancouver and the city of Langley are about the same. So what's our role in Metro? Well, 2/3 of the water from the region comes from North Vancouver, from Capilano, and there's Capilano and the Cleveland Dam. If you haven't been there, the pictures are beautiful. This is my kind of hometown in Lynn Valley, and the Seymour watershed in the filtration plant and up the valley there. Lynn Canyon, if you've ever been there. Kind of leads into our next thing, is site recreation. We are the green in the region of the cities in the sea of green. And so Quarry Rock, Cove, beautiful hike. We've got kayaking up Indian Arm. We've seen some great guys doing mountain biking in the news. So what does that mean about our future? So in 2011, actually from a period from 2008 to 2011, we went through a official community plan process, which I understand that the City of Vancouver has the luxury of not doing because of the charter, the Vancouver Charter. But all other municipalities in the province are mandated to think about growth, where you're going to put growth, how you're going to deal with all the issues, and put that in a plan through consultation every 5 to 10 years. It's mandated. So we decided that we haven't been growing for a long time. There are some key issues about housing affordability and availability. What types of houses are we going to live into? The demographic profile. There's no young people living in North Vancouver anymore. And what are the economic and social impacts of that? And we said, well, we're going to start to accept some growth. We're going to try and promote this, but it's going to be smart growth. It's going to be focused in town centers. It's going to be connected by transit, and so that's the plan that we came up with. We have 4 town centers. We're going to put 75 to 90% of our growth in those town centers, and we're going to leave the rest for now because we want to focus on building these walkable, sustainable communities. How we're doing? Growth is not fast as we predicted. This is very, very slow growth. This is about 1 or 2% growth compared to the regional average, and some of the key issues that came out of the OCP didn't necessarily translate during the 2014 election when I was elected, which was traffic was a key issue, and then traffic or development as well. Change is hard for people, and if you haven't grown for 15 years, even one apartment building is a big difference. And then traffic caused by development. So obviously these new people are causing more traffic. So those were the key issues. I think that's about 5 minutes, so I'll pass it on to me.
Nathan.
Thank you very much. So if I do this, we'll do City in the Sea of Green from Langley City. So how many people been to Langley City before? Do you Langley City or Langley Township?
Maybe
So we'll have a little discussion about that. So what's the diff? And that's okay because people in Langley Township don't even know. So if they call City Hall. So just a bit of geography. We're up here. Langley City is this little community here. We're 10 square kilometers. And we're kind of, when we thought about this conversation, we kind of did the diagonal line between North Vancouver and the city of Langley. When you look at these cities like this, like the city of North Vancouver, New Westminster, and the city of Langley, we're actually one of the original settlements. If you look at like colonial history, obviously in Langley City, it's been home to the Solo Nations for many, many millennia. But that's sort of the context when you think about the modern setting of Metro Vancouver today. If you look at the, and this spread that's a bit wonky, if you look at Metro Vancouver's regional growth strategy, they identify these areas as town centers. Langley City is one of those town centers here. The goal being that we want to create places where people can work, people can shop, and people can live and walk around. The point being that we don't have to have a central city where everyone has to commute into Vancouver and commute out, which creates a whole bunch of traffic issues. One of the interesting stats of the region we're in is 80% of the trips are internal, which means that we provide one job for every person kind of thing, which is really great. And when you kind of look into the context of how you provide public transit then, you actually end up with the opportunities of if you have strong centers here, strong centers there, it makes providing frequent transit actually affordable and practical. So the 502, 503, 320, 395 all run down this corridor. So during rush hour, there's a bus every 2 minutes or less. And you think, oh, that's weird. Isn't this areas of just single-family homes, right? There's nothing there. But yeah, so it's amazing what you can do with these town sites. So going back to a little bit of history about Langley City, it was one of the original European settlements in the south of Fraser. It served the farm communities that were established there. It formed around the same time as places like New Westminster as well. So we're pretty old. Fort Langley, just up the street, was the original capital, but he decided to steal it and make it his own. So this is actually downtown Langley. This is the site of Clover Road and Fraser Highway, which is the center of downtown Langley. Over here is City Hall today. This is Langley City in 1950s. So as we were becoming this vibrant urban center back in the 1950s and the rest of the area was farmland, we wanted this thing called streetlights. Very novel concept. So the farmers that were councillors at the time said, not a nickel for streetlights. So that didn't sit well with the urban population in Langley, so we decided to create our own community, and that hasn't really changed. It's really funny when you talk to people in the township, they're like, why don't you come back? I mean, we'll take all your casino money, and it would be great. So So, this is Langley's downtown today. And Langley City is a walking city. And when people think of the South of Bridget, they don't think of walking. But that is the primary way that people can get around. We have a large seniors population because of the walkability. We have doctors' offices, everything you need, 3 grocery stores within a 10-minute walk of where I live. Everything is close when you're in 10 square kilometers. It also makes you think about how you provision services. So that's just me having a good time in McMurray Plaza in downtown. Obviously, there is room for improvement. This is the Langley Mall, one of the earliest malls in the region. Right now, it's a big empty parking lot because the developer's waiting for SkyTrain or light rail to come down and build towers or something. But you can see, there is signs of density increasing all over the place. So there's an example of one of the new luxury apartments in the Langley context being built. One of the things about our community is the whole conversation about affordability focuses on the price of housing has gone skyrocketing through the roof. Oh my goodness. In Langley City, we are one of the poorest communities in the region, and I live in the poorest neighborhood in Langley City. The price of my condo has gone down year over year, and it's actually gone down for most people. So the situation we run into as a municipality is, well, single-family homes go up, the value of the apartments go down. So when we set our mill rates for taxes, people who live in stratas, their taxes go down every year. So one of the other things we have to worry about in our community is we want to increase the mix of housing choices. So we would like to have more people that are of mixed incomes in our community, while at the same time, how do we maintain our old, or how do we renovate our old apartment stock that was built in the 60s and 70s that have a lot of seniors on low income. We don't want to displace some, but we have to think of policies on how we can accommodate that. Just a short, what would you say, 6-minute walk from downtown is the Nipalmappa floodplain, which goes right through our community east to west. And that's, I think, why people live here. So we are a city in a sea of green and a sea of green. So that is my introduction to Langley City.
Thank you. We're halfway between those two is Westminster, which is in the center of it all. It's the center of the Lower Mainland, really, geographically speaking. You can't talk about New Westminster, you can't understand it without understanding the history, or so all my senior council members keep on reminding me. New Westminster is a historic city. This is a member of the Kakite First Nation. This was originally an area settled, of course, by the First Nations. I'm a geologist. I want to think about history in the 250 million. I want to talk about the growth of the Cordillera, but and I also want to talk about the Kakite history, 8,000 years of them living here before colonials arrived, but the capital happened when the colonials arrived. When Colonel Moody came to Canada to decide where the capital would be placed, he looked at Fort Langley and said, you're in the middle of a swamp on the wrong side of the river from the invading American hordes. I decided that this was a good defensible spot on the right side of the river, and it became a capital. And then it became a capital in about 1856, the first city in Western Canada. And then about 6 or 8 years later, for the first of a long series of ways that Victoria has messed with local governments, they stole the capital from us when the two colonies were amalgamated. But New Westminster didn't stop. It was a growing city. At time leading up to World War II, it was the home of the Pacific Fishing Fleet. It was the home of the Pacific Shipbuilding Fleet. The main street in Columbia Street was the Miracle Mile. It was the Robson Street of the day. It's because we had an electric rail that took people from this new upstart western suburb called Vancouver into there, and it also had a bridge that connected us to the farms where all the supplies were coming from in the Fraser Valley. It was the crossroads of British Columbia, and it was incredibly successful as the crossroads of British Columbia. And then a decline happened. Fishing went away. A lot of the sawmills got amalgamated. Deindustrialization happened to the waterfront. The way we moved freight on the port changed because we started moving in containers. There was no room in New Westminster for containers. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that sort of economic policy through the mid-century, I don't have to tell urban people, there's a bunch of ways in the mid-century that urban policy or that economic policy hurt urban areas, and New Westminster suffered the most. So by the early 80s, or early 80s, mid-80s when the SkyTrain arrived, a lot of downtown New Westminster was speakeasies, dollar beer places, bingo halls. The waterfront was largely abandoned. There's only a couple of mills left. It went through a real serious decline. After the SkyTrain came, there was a bunch of things. I mean, there was a time in '86 when it arrived that really downtown was not a great place to be. It wasn't a comfortable place to be. There was a lot of cars going through it. It was also a little crime-ridden. There was a very open drug trade on the street. It was really not a very great place. But the council at the time saw the opportunity coming to SkyTrain, saw the opportunity to reimagine the downtown. They put an OCP together. They brought in mixed use downtown. They put Columbia Street on a road diet, took this 4-lane through and turned it into a street that people wanted to spend time on. And through 20 years of work, they really started to redevelop the downtown and see the rebirth of it. However, if you're from Vancouver, this is how you know New Westminster. You know from the traffic reports, right? So I'm going to tell you a few things you don't know about New Westminster. If you haven't spent time there or don't know much about it, these are the things you don't know about New Westminster. New Westminster is 70,000 people living on 16 square kilometers with 5 SkyTrain stations. We use transit more than any other municipality in the Lower Mainland. For our commuters, we're second only to Vancouver for alternative mode share. People in New Westminster don't use their cars less than any other city except for downtown Vancouver. We're building compact. When you talk about sort of this idea of building transit-oriented, compact density around urban centers, New Westminster is getting way ahead of this game, and we're doing a really good job on that. We got a really young mayor, youngest mayor in the region. He was elected last election, 35 years old, young dynamic guy. But he came with a lot of experience. He spent 9 years on council before he was elected. He also got a master's degree from Simon Fraser University at urban planning. He lives in a high-rise condo with his large family in downtown New Westminster, a walk from City Hall and a walk from right above the SkyTrain station. So he understands urbanist principles and lives them, and is bringing a really dynamic energy to what's happening in City Hall. Housing. We have a lot of apartments in New Westminster. Again, we have a high proportion of renters per capita of any city in the Lower Mainland. We also have, so we are doing things to keep that stock alive, actually. We're not against that idea, but we're trying to keep it alive. We have currently 3 projects in downtown Vancouver that are all market rental. They're all going to be, there's going to be like 1,000 places coming online in the next couple of years for strictly market rental buildings. We also have the most aggressive family-friendly housing policy in Canada. We have 30% of any multifamily unit has to be two bedrooms or more, 10% has to be 3 bedrooms or more. We mandated this, and because we realized that we need family-friendly, affordable living next to a SkyTrain station in the West. And because of that, there's lots of cool things going on in the West. We are getting a younger vibe, and we have a new waterfront park that we're working to support it. We've got a bunch of new cool events going on. We're getting a bit of an urban vibe around some of our foodie things. We're getting festivals going on. We're getting younger. It's a place where hipsters go to have kids. But we can't get any of it solved without dealing with this problem. It doesn't matter how urban friendly our city is. It doesn't matter how comfortable our streets are. It doesn't matter how we manage our smart growth around centers. If we have 400,000 cars a day driving through our city, going from south and east through our city, it's hard for us to develop our urban center the way we imagine. So that's our biggest challenge. How's that? 17
Amazing. You guys we're right on time. That's a first for Paul. Okay. Participants. Now it's your turn. Questions, observations? What? Who wants to start? Yes, ma'am.
I'll start with housing. There's talk about single-family homes, there's talk about high-rise apartments. It's the bit in between that seems to be missing. How do you get more townhouses? How do you get more fee-simple townhouses? How do you get more cluster housing and laneway housing and other things besides those 2 extremes? How do you get that? How do you get it to happen?
Great question. Okay. Go for it.
Well, we're currently doing our OCP update right now, and that is becoming the central question of our OCP discussion. We do have, again, 95% of people in the U.S. either live in a high-rise or a single-family home. We don't have any of those at missing middle in the U.S. It's a real problem. We're very constrained in land. We don't have any green fields that we're going to be developing. We're developing on land that's been developed for 100 years. So it is a challenge. But part of the OCP process, we're doing public consultations. We've tried to fix the OCP process that would try to get the people who want to live in New Westminster or cannot afford to live in a single-family house in New Westminster. So I think, as Michael referred to it, we have done a bunch of different ways of doing our OCP outreach. One of them, we literally had a Beer Friday event at River Market. We had a local brewery sell beer, a local microbrewery that everyone loves in town, and we had a barbecue restaurant serve food, serve ribs and fried chicken and stuff. And we only advertised it online, through the city's website, through Twitter, through Instagram, through Facebook. And we had 50 people show up at that thing. 50 people who don't come to a normal OCP meeting. They were generally under the age of 40. We had daycare there, so they could actually bring their young kids and sit out the daycare. And they sat down for 2 hours and talked about what kind of housing they wanted, which was great because it was a different conversation than normal OCP, where people look at it and say, what does this mean to my home? Which is an important discussion, which is something we get a lot of in the OCP. But the other half of the discussion is people looking at the map and saying, oh, I could live in that. Oh, can we make that work somewhere in the city so that my family can move in there when I'm a second kid and we have to be really good at it? So it's changing the conversation a bit about how we develop the land is the first step.
But I can probably talk more about that because a lot of the things depend on where you are in the region. So if you go to the south of Fraser and you look at the development, you'll see that in Langley City, where we are, we have no towers. It's the maximum you'll see because of geology is 6-story buildings. And then other than that, I mean, the biggest development applications we see are townhouses and apartments and the occasional subdivision for smaller or for a house. If you go to the township in the new areas that they're building in Willoughby, like if you just drive there, it's just all townhouses, and in Surrey, it's a good mix of that. So I think it depends on where in the region you are. And I think affordability, at least in the south of Fraser, is what's driving people to townhouses. And we have these simple townhouses and row houses in the township of Langley and in the city of Langley. So it might not be happening in Vancouver, but it's certainly happening in the south of Fraser already.
I think
I'm a geologist, he's an engineer. We can build 2 towers and that's soil.
We don't want towers.
I think adding on to Patrick's point there, we're about 5 years into our OCP already. And one of the interesting things that I found, I was a bit younger at that time and not on council, but there was a trade-off that our community made. And having not grown for so long, there was a lot of fear of change, a lot of fear of any growth. You've got the same population for 10 or 15 years. One apartment building is a big deal. And so there was a bit of a trade-off where the density, the apartments, towers possibly, would be put in very certain areas, and the neighborhoods would be protected and preserved. And I think what we're realizing now, at least I'm trying to start that conversation about realizing, is that 5 years ago, a single-family home in North Vancouver was $800,000, on average. Now that same house last year was 1.2. This year it's 1.4, and it's selling to 1.6. So since we're not building townhomes, the townhomes now are more than the single-family homes were 5 years ago. And so there's a lot of issues to address there in that conversation when you start talking to all the homeowners that are in their 50s or 60s or 70s and whose children are moving out of the community, and they're realizing, oh wait, that means I'm going to have to move too because I want to be close to my grandkids. So it's a new dynamic that's kind of forming now, but it's that conversation that's not going to happen right away.
First of all, I want to thank you for your question, because you just gave us the topic for another city conversation. Missing
Housing
over here, please. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I live in Vancouver. I'm planner by profession. I'm just absolutely curious why condominium values are going down in Langley. That's one question. And the other one is what North Vancouver is doing in regards to climate change and potential fires on the slopes and landslides and all of that.
So there's 2 things that's happening in Langley City and Township that's causing a decrease in apartment or condo prices. So The first one is that if you build it and you build enough of it, then you can drive the value of the place down, and we've definitely done that in our area, which is good. So you talk about affordability, we have enough land, you can build enough apartments, you can drive the cost down. So that's number one. The second thing is Langley City has challenges that come from being a poor community. We're also the social service center for the south of Fraser. So we have, things like when you see people shooting up on the street and tent cities outside, that also has an impact on the value of property as well. So we have a lot of, when you think of a lot of the issues in the downtown east side, those things are actually happening in Langley City in certain areas as well. So like our fire department, for example, was just talking about that the other day, is we have the highest amount of calls for medical emergencies and overdoses, like at the same level as the downtown east side. So those are the sorts of things of why it's happening in Langley. What was the other one for me, or was it for him?
Well, that's it's interesting. What I didn't get to that part. I think I missed that comment in my presentation, but it kind of speaks to what I, as being a newcomer to politics in North Vancouver. North Vancouver district is very pragmatic. We're not. There's no slates. There's no parties, and we do a lot of the unsexy municipal work. Vancouver in 2006, which started us down the path of looking at disaster risk management, and we've done a lot of work mapping out all the risks, whether they're slope risks, wildfire risks, stream side or flood risks. And in 2011, we actually won a United Nations award, the Saskatchewan Award for disaster risk management. So that's embedded into our policies. We've got development permit areas that we've mapped all over the district and say, if you're going to develop or change a land use or build a home or anything in these areas that are prone to risks, here's the additional requirements that you're going to need to meet those. We're following up on a lot of the provincial funding in terms of wildfire management and wildfire communities that came out of the Kelowna fires almost a decade ago. And so going through the interface areas and kind of getting rid of the ladder fields. And then on climate change, we've got a strong climate change adaptation policy that looks at, again, we had a flood last in the fall of 2014. And so going to all of our different creeks, assessing the flood risk due to increased rainfall events or more intense rainfall events, and then upping the infrastructure to be able to deal and support those things.
And what do you do for fire protection?
For fire protection? Well, right now it's the wildfire risk areas, so there's different building standards if you're in the interface zone. And then the treatment areas that we're slowly working our way across to treat the interface areas with the, the forest edge and the urban edge.
North Shore is doing a great thing actually, because the three municipalities in North Shore are actually really working together on that aspect. They're all their emergency planning is all done as a single entity essentially. The three governments work together. It's kind of an example of how we sometimes think that amalgamation of cities would be a great idea because it would save resources. Frankly, cities are already doing that. There was something like that. I mean, a fire risk on the North Shore is something that all three cities care about, so they all work together to coordinate it. I've watched it happen with emergency planning in the city of Oregon, so it's a good model.
Well, I mean, if you talk about amalgamation, that's something you don't talk about in the But it goes to the point though, because a lot of folks in township were like, you should amalgamate, everything will be cheaper, and it showed that it actually isn't. And if you look at the things where there's economies of scale, at least water, sewer, garbage, regional parks, transit, all those things. Yeah, even fire service. You're talking about like if there's a problem and we don't have enough people in Langley City, people from the township come in. We like to say we're one community in spirit. There's a lot of things we give them money for, and we get to use their parks and stuff. So it's happening, and we have a real great region because we all cooperate. And if you look at Toronto or other places, I mean, how this model works is a lot better because we can have a conversation and agree on things. Where if there were one mega city, I bet you we'd be at odds with each other right now. So.
That's true all over North America. You see this constant headbutting conflicts. Toronto, San Francisco, where they've been trying to put together a regional government now for over 40 years, and they're just creeping towards it. There was a question here, and then over here, and then over here, please.
My question is really in the context of the provincial government stating, I think, yesterday or the day before, said, look, you can develop around the SkyTrain, and if you bring in the money, that would pay for transit. And yet, we know that if you add the fees in, the development cost charges, or actually community amenity charges, that actually decreases affordability. So we have the provincial government saying one thing, and the local politicians saying something else. And I think most of us realise where our sympathies lie. What would need you, the three of you, do to try and change the governance structure of Metro Vancouver?
Well, those are, that last piece you put on is separate from everything else you talked about.
Yeah. You're talking about translates or Metro Vancouver?
I think that, again, on the transit situation, it is an example how it was an unprecedented example of the communities of this region working together. The mayors did not all agree on every aspect of that plan, but they worked together and banged out a compromise and came up with what I think is a hell of a plan. Every day we don't fund it, the cost of that plan is about $1 billion or $1 million a day, because that plan's getting more expensive because the cost of buying land to make it happen, the cost of resources to build what we need to build to make that plan work is going up every day, and we need to get that done very quickly. DCCs on, there's two arguments for DCCs on land lift that's related to transit infrastructure. One is that you should do it because they're going to make the most money, that the land lift's going to happen, that's where the money's going to come from when you build around transit. The other argument is why are you disincentivizing living next to a transit center? Why are you adding a cost to something that's built at a transit center? Maybe we should bring the DCCs in those single family homes that are up on, I'll pick Mary Hill. I'll pick an area that's not north. All those single family homes.
Pick on the chair of Metro
Vancouver. So why not put on those single family homes that are not being built or developed in a way? The new ones that are being built are not being developed in a way that transit gets through. So maybe we should add the cost of that to disincentivize it. That's a philosophical argument we have to have. Land lift is not enough. There's not enough money to pay for building the transit system we need to build in this city. It's simply not. It's one of the multiple tools we're going to have to use. And I think we're working towards a multiple tool model. What we need is a little bit of leadership and one missing piece in the three parts of government. We have one missing piece.
There is one missing piece. I can tell you which one that is. But I want to talk about the DCCs.
You're sounding like politicians.
I want to talk about the DCCs though, and because we actually did some research, and so CACs in the Vancouver context are, I think, crazy and out of control, but when you get to what we can do in the rest of BC, it's much more constrained. So when we looked at DCCs and the level that we set, the development community speaking on the lift, I mean, it makes sense from a context of where we are in the south of Fraser in Langley City, and you look at the value of property, because it's charged on the value of property, the areas that are the least, that benefit the least from the investment in transit actually pay the least as well. And those are actually the developers. So when they looked at the numbers, they said that the kind of dollars we're proposing would be absorbed, because the market will only handle a certain amount too. Like Langley City, speaking about affordability again, if a developer all of a sudden decided that the house, the apartment building or the townhouse that they want to do was $300,000, now it's $350,000 compared to all the other ones, it's not going to happen, and people will move elsewhere. So the research they've done and even experiences of DCCs at the local level, it doesn't really, it's kind of a red herring at the kind of value we're talking about for DCCs. See, again, we don't really have the CAC thing like Vancouver, so that's why. And as far as it goes with Metro is fantastic. I would, tweak it, but the governance is fine. TransLink, I think the governance, I would like to see that if the region is paying for transit, we should probably be the ones that have some ability to direct how the agencies run.
Everybody understand what a DCC is, what a CAC is?
Development cost charge.
One
DCC is the development cost charge. It is a money that cities charge to developers to increase the value of land when they take a relatively slightly zoned property, make it into a high-rise tower that has a bunch of value. The city is able through provincial regulation to charge the developer a DCC a charge, and that money is earmarked for specific purposes. Upgrading sewers, putting in public art, parks, it's designated infrastructure to make up for the fact that we're going to have to buy more infrastructure to support the people who live in that town.
Okay. And a CAC?
Like, so, we don't have CACs in the same
Community,
sense.
community.
It's a community amenity charge. so-
Amenity charge, it's only true, it's only in Vancouver, because Vancouver has its own charter, so it's not completely governed. Do you have an?
Yeah, any municipality can use CACs. And the concept behind that is that the municipality or the local government is giving a higher zoning and therefore increasing the value of a property when we choose to or choose not to rezone a property, say from a single family house to a 20-story tower. That piece of property, through our decision, has increased astronomically in value. And the people that are going to be most affected by that new residents, new infrastructure, are the people that live in the community right now. And therefore, shouldn't the municipality take some of that benefit of that increase in land value because we're granting that through our right to grant zoning to a developer?
No, that's through density, at least my understanding is through density bonusing, so we can say like, in my
Yes,
township.
Technically, that's how it's done.
Bonusing is different than, so we can say, you can build a
Baseball.
one-story.
We're getting very deep inside baseball now.
Well, no, you can build a one-story house here, but if you build you could do something which you wouldn't do. You said you could build a one-story house here in downtown Langley, or you could build an apartment and then we'll negotiate a mutually beneficial thing. But I think Vancouver operates differently.
Well, in Vancouver, for example, when Yaletown was built, towers were taller than originally planned. The developer gained the benefit of net income, but the developer had to provide seawall, had to provide parks, had to provide the daycare centers, had to provide the Roundhouse Community Center. All of those community amenities, right, were extracted because the developer was making more money, but the city said, you're making more money, you've got to give.
And you have to recognize Vancouver has a negotiating skill, a negotiating ability that many of our smaller communities don't have.
Because if we said that, they would say, okay, fine, we're not
See you later, we're not
developing.
going to.
I'm only giving Yaletown as an example,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
just so that you understand. There was a question over here and then over there. Yes.
Yeah, I'm curious about, in the planning of your communities, how you use the public's input in that, but also particularly how you've seen that evolve and you see that evolving, if at all.
Well, I think I went through the official community plan process in North Vancouver. That was about 5 years ago, and I think we were able to get about 5,000 residents, individual residents, out at the 2 years consultation that we did on the plan, to actually out in person, in a meeting, in a design charrette, talking about specific issues around the community. And so that was a bit of a departure. I think North Vancouver, we do a lot of consultation, a lot of consultation. We do a lot of talking about things, which is good. And how that's evolved now is we've actually, for a couple of the more contentious issues where you've got 10 people saying 10 different things and they're all coming to council asking for a solution to the problem, makes it a little bit difficult for local politicians to understand exactly what the right direction is. So we've actually engaged SFU Center for Dialogue to do a dialogue process for 2 issues. One, we had an issue in Deep Cove where the parking was crazy and people couldn't find a place to park. Local residents, local businesses. There's people that live up Indian Arm that could only access their homes by a boat. They didn't live in the district of North Vancouver, but they had to park in the district to get to their homes. And so council made a few decisions about parking and obviously didn't account for all the stakeholders. We did a deliberative dialogue session on that, and that started off another process which we're doing right now is we have an old recreation center site. It's 5 acres in our community, and we consolidated 2 rec centers together. We've got a brand new one opening up, and then we've got this 5-acre site. Very contentious about what might happen to that site. Parts of the community say we want it to be a park, fully park. Other parts of the community say, hey, we just paid $60 million for a new rec center. Why do we have to build all that on the tax bill? Right? And so we're doing the same process again. Deliberative dialogue, bringing all different stakeholders together, sitting at tables across from people that might have differing or opposite opinions themselves to co-create solutions for and options for what may happen. So it's a really unique process. I sat through that, and it's probably different than a lot of local governments have done in the past.
So we're going through our OCP process right now. Like I said, 2 years we've been working on it, and we'll hopefully be done by the end of this year, or else I'm going to pull some hair out of my head. We have used a lot of interesting different techniques from open houses. We've reached more than 1,000 people have sat in front of a table with a map in front of them and drawn things on a map that's gone to this consultation. We have done a huge number of events in different communities. We've had sort of pop-up city halls and community events. We've had them go to Salmon Bellies games, to the lacrosse teams games, and talk to people at the park while they're watching their kids play lacrosse. We've done a ton of different types of events. We did a whole online survey. We did an interactive mapping exercise on. We have reached thousands of people through this process, and it is crazy, but it's what we do. We've also got the Center of Dialogue. We're advertising for Center of Dialogue today. Because one of the things the new mayor decided is we really need to do better public engagement better at every level. And that's not just OCP things. That's about telling people about the rules of a new bylaw, or asking people about how we should manage our urban forest. We need to do better dialogue both ways. And so we've got a new what is it called? Public Dialogue Task Force. That's what it is. A task force group. But we got the SFU guys in helping us put together a whole bunch of techniques that we're going to be using and taking out to the public. We actually had a public consultation session on doing better public consultation, which is crazy. Yeah, so we're trying to do better, and we're recognizing that there's a lot of new tools that we were doing more online. We're doing more of sort of interesting, innovative tools, but really, a lot of people just don't engage with that stuff. You really got to go to where they are, and you've got to go to the neighborhoods they're in.
So unfortunately, in Langley,
Nathan,
yes.
Parking came up. You guys have been doing some interesting stuff about trade-offs.
Right, so this is me. So unfortunately, in Langley City, this is their level of how they engage the public. Right now in Langley City, we're kind of in the, here's our scheduled public hearing. So just last year, they started doing neighborhood meetings, which is a marked improvement. Public engagement is really important to me because I trust the public engagement tool, and I've seen the positive results that come from it. But a lot of people who have been in politics, like in my community for 30 years, their memories are of that is people get the microphone at the public hearing, right? And so there's a bit of apprehension, and to make that become more positive, I've been trying to work on that. So for example, there's a park master plan, and they gave the typical, gather your input, here's option A or B. No one liked option A or B. So I did this thing, I did a web poll because I don't like parking, and I said, do you want more parking in the park? But I got a great response. Within a day, I got 245 responses. I did some stuff to know that as people from Langley City. Brought that to City Council, and now we're using social media to outreach for our public hearings. So that's good, and I think we have a lot of room for improvement there. As far as the bike lane thing, there was some funding for me before I was elected for our 203rd Street corridor for MUP, which I don't like as a cyclist. So I started talking to the people in the neighborhood, MUP, multi-use pathway, which is where you put, instead of cyclists and cars colliding with each other, it's pedestrians and scooters and bicycles colliding with each other. So not very good. So we walked to the neighborhood, and I said, hey, what do you think of this? What are some ideas? You like the idea of greenways and stuff, and showed them some pictures and said, what do you think? And they're like, oh, there's no parking in your drawing, Nathan. Well, what if I did it like this? And then we got to the point, so I had a meeting with City Hall, and I'm like, hey, just me, Nathan, but here's a cool idea if you're thinking that may be better, right? So that's I wish that would be more part of the formal process now, and I'm working hard, I think, to hopefully make that more people in our council and our staff feel comfortable with that to see the positive results.
Yeah, our staff is receptive. That's not a problem with us. I think it's a bit of a culture change that has to happen, and I think we're learning through this process. The most important part is feedback. People get involved in public consultation, they go to some meetings, they give the city some information, and then 6 months later a report is written, and council passes the report, and we move on. And we move on. But people never get feedback. They spend their afternoon going to a meeting and learning about doing a public and telling people something. They need to be told 6 months later, oh look, here's the results about the things you told us. And you may agree with some of it, you may disagree with some of it, but this is what you told us and this is what we did with it. That feedback loop is almost always missing in public engagement. It's really tough. Yeah.
I'm going to jump to Gordon Price because
Never heard of
you
it.
have a.
You know how it works?
You have,
Okay, to be argumentative. Patrick,
Yes.
you have a significantly improved public consultation process. Your population is dropping and your house prices are doubling. Patrick, you are proud of your public consultation process. You're missing the middle. Housing prices are going up. Nathan, be careful what you wish for. But anyone would call affordable housing. Isn't the object of the game and improve quality of life, thereby increasing unaffordability?
So I can talk about affordability because we have affordable housing now because it's substandard housing, and that's
Yeah, my point is, is it really possible to have an extensive public consultation process with the people in the room, and then think for a moment that you're going to be able to radically change the nature of the community to achieve this broader goal?
Yes. Now, no, there is a spectrum of public engagement. And at one end of public engagement, there is, we're just going to make sure that everyone knows that what date of recycling is getting picked up. That's just city telling people things. The other end of public engagement is this idea where we just let the public decide whatever. We just do a referendum and let them decide what's going to happen. There's a spectrum in between those, and we're just trying to push towards people feeling included and feel like they're heard. I mean, ultimately, council's got to make decisions, and it is tough. I mean, maybe it's a young thing. Saying no to me is a good answer sometimes. Maybe that's a young thing.
And I think that the interesting thing is, there is that range of public consultation, but it's making sure that the people that you consult with are representative of the population. Because, I went to all candidates meetings where there's 400 people in the room. I asked, okay, how many people here are under the age of 40, right? 3 people put their hands up. And so when you're talking about making decisions, when you see, and half of our population is under the age of 40, right? How many people own their home? Well, 80% of people in North Vancouver own their home, which is, a lot different than the other places in the region. But when you start thinking about the missing middle, when you start thinking about options for the future, for the next generation of the community, you have to bring in that voice, and you have to appeal to that voice within the people that do come out to every meeting, that are there, and get them to think in maybe or encourage people to have a conversation about that thought and how we might think about the future.
It's not even going to the meeting though. So City of Abbotsford did their Abbots Forward OCP process, and their whole thing was not bringing people to meetings because if they don't get the representation, you need to go where people are. So they were at the festivals for every culture. They were at the parks, in the parking lots. My friend was walking down every street for 3 years, getting information. Right? That's how you gather that feedback. And when you give people choice and options and have them make decisions too, it's not just what do you want? Oh, that's great. But I'll go to the parking thing, for example. So in our parks, it's, well, we reduce parking, so what about people parking on the street, right? What about the fact that now we can't have a sports event in the winters of sports tourism, and people get the opportunity to be decision makers themselves, and when they're presented with complex decisions and you talk to people that are in diverse representation, you get good results. I mean, that's what I fundamentally believe.
I've seen it in Moody Park, in a neighborhood in New Westminster, which is not our most historic neighborhood, Queen's Park. But it is a historic neighborhood, full of single-family homes, full of a lot of older single-family homes, a lot of heritage homes. And I've seen that neighborhood shift from seeing an OCP that's going to see more density, going to see more different types of housing, and just say, no, we have to protect our historic neighborhood, we like it just the way it is. And I've watched them over the last 4 months of public engagement, so that changed to, well, we don't want change, but maybe we could put a couple of laneway houses in. Maybe that'll increase the, with my kids, I mean, if we move my house over, put another beside it, I can put 2 houses, my kids can live here. But that shift is happening because the loud voices will always be heard. And the whole purpose of public engagement is to get the quieter voices out. I mean, we were all loud people, that's how we got elected. But yeah, getting the quieter people out and going to the events where they don't expect to be engaged and ask questions about their housing choice, that's the magic of engagement. So maybe I'm too much of an idealist, eh?
The most patient Gentlemen in the room. You've had your hand up since the beginning. I appreciate it.
The delegate from Langley spoke about homelessness and drug issues
Yep.
and social services. I'd be interested in hearing the perspective from the other two communities on those subjects.
I'm new to the council, so there's been a lot of good work done in New Westminster around that exact issue. New Westminster was going through exactly that problem 20 years ago. It was in a bad state. And I can take no credit at all for the good work they've done to manage that issue. A lot of that management is we have a ton of social service agencies operating in New Westminster, and we support them, and we, as a city, fund them as best we can, and we do everything we can to identify our homeless people and give them options and make sure they know they have options. We have hired mental health officers in our police department so that when they meet homeless people or people who are having mental health issues in the street or drug addicted, they know how to approach those people in a non-confrontational way so that it doesn't become a law enforcement issue, it becomes a social service issue. We have John Starr, I'm not going to mention his name. We have a social planner in our city. I don't want to mention anybody else because he is a genius and he is a really dedicated, hardworking guy who coordinates.
What was his name?
Yeah. who is amazing at coordinating all of our partnership organizations. I mean, it's not the city doing it, it's us partnering with a variety of faith and non-faith organizations and health service organizations that are taking a proactive approach to managing the issue instead of just using law enforcement to shuffle them down the street to the next city. And it took a long time. It took 10, 15 years. And now there's eyes on the street it's a relatively comfortable place. It is a comfortable place, I think, on Columbia Street. But it takes work, it takes governance, and it takes a lot of money and time.
Time for one more.
Well, I can answer quickly. Yeah, addiction, homelessness, social issues, they are everywhere in all of our communities. They're not seen as much as they are in North Vancouver. They're not seen, but they are there. And so I think we are starting to realize that as a community. We just had a terrible process getting a 9-bed men's recovery, addiction recovery facility in our community. There was 200 angry people at a public hearing, and just the amount of work just to get 9 beds. We don't have any beds right now for men's recovery. We just put in 9 beds for women's recovery 2 or 3 years ago. We don't have a homeless shelter in the district of North Vancouver. There's one in the city, right? But, and when I talk to the people at the Lookout Society, people that are homeless in North Vancouver don't want to go downtown east side. They don't want to go somewhere else for stability. So they're camping. They're in the woods, right? And this is, so it's there. It's just not top of mind to people when, traffic and other things are more top of mind, right? So it's something that we have to deal with, but it's not top of mind for residents right now.
Okay, one more quickly.
Yes, what are you doing to allow TransLink to operate their buses efficiently with your road system?
I sit on the advisory committee for transit bicycles and pedestrians, and we are working. I can tell you a bunch of good things that are going on. We are spending a bunch of money making sure that all of our bus stops are accessible. We will be the first city to have 100% accessible bus stops at all of our bus stops. We do work with transit all the time on adjusting street geometry and stuff in order to accommodate buses better. Our biggest problem is we're losing bus service. We are losing bus service in New Westminster. Bus service is being reduced in New Westminster. In the center of it all, in an urban center, we've built this compact, transit-oriented city. We are losing bus service because a couple of our lines aren't really as well populated as they should, and so they're just they don't have any money. Transit doesn't have any. The best thing we can all do for bus service is give them some money so they can buy some buses so we can get some buses into these cities.
Sorry. It's just like, if you're on the frequent transit Fraser Highway corridor, you're good to go. In Langley City, we're a very small section of that. So we have the plan to work with TransLink on a transit hub in the middle of our town that's going to be tied in with light rail. But the point being is, I'm losing the bus route outside my house. So there you go.
Wow. So you're a counselor.
Okay. We've got to stop, because it's 1:30. If you aren't on our email list, please sign up here on the pad. Here, so that you can learn about our next event. Our next event will be June 2nd, Thursday, June 2nd. We're working on the topic. You'll get an email. All of you are on the email list. Get an email what the topic is, but it's going to be very topical to something that's going on.
I got a good idea for a topic.
Quick,
Just quickly, because this came up in discussion, quickly.
quick.
3 young guys. How about we talk about diversity of local government representation? Two-minute topic that let's talk about now, but this should be a topic about how can elected officials are white guys?
With the criticism that we got on Twitter, which was, how come it's only 3 white guys?
Almost.
Thank you all. See you in 2 weeks. Very well.
Certainly looks like a wine bottle. Wine bottle? Good idea. Very mellow, right?